So you know the deal. So I'm going to go through all the pictures that you've given us about your experience. Just give us some backstory, some background, or like things that were happening in the back of the picture that weren't so obvious. Uh, Feel free to share some funny photo of stories as well. So yeah,
Sure.
let's get into it. A nice picture of hot pot. What was going on here?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. We were discussing earlier, and I was saying it's actually, it's not a very good photo, but it's actually
Yeah,
quite meaningful to me. So the
yeah.
background for this one was taken on the very, very first day I arrived in Taiwan when I started my new Colombo Plan Scholarship. And I remember getting off the plane at like 6:30 a.m. and it was super hot in Taipei, and I'd
Mm,
never been overseas by myself before.
mm,
And I sort of had one suitcase with all my stuff in it, and I was trundling around trying to find this hotel I booked, and I was just completely overwhelmed. And I ended up contacting the another scholar called Cameron, who is already in Taiwan,
mhm.
and I was kind of like, hey, can we like hang out or something? Because I'm a bit overwhelmed here. And he's like, oh, sure, yeah, I'm getting lunch with a friend, and you're welcome to come join.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, good, that sounds good. It'd be nice to have like someone familiar to hang out with.
mm.
And then he took us to this hot pot restaurant,
Yeah.
and I was just completely confused. I'd never had hot pot before, and there's suddenly like fire on my table, and there's bits of meat and eggs, and I was just like, what's going on? And I was thinking,
Yeah.
like, do I just get on the plane and go home? Like,
Bring the plate home.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, and then yeah, it was just quite. It's interesting to reflect back on, because I think probably a couple of weeks later, I was
Yeah.
completely at home, loving it, and hot pot was my jam. So it's amazing how much learning took place in such a short period of time.
Awesome, mate. Prior to going to Taiwan, did you travel to any other like Asian destinations or travel in general?
Yeah, I'd sort of done a few family holidays, but they were usually sort of like go and stay at a resort in Fiji kind of thing. And so
Mm,
I'd never really had that experience of traveling by myself and
yeah.
then sort of being immersed in a culture. It was kind of more of like go and sit on the beach somewhere for a couple of days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite eye opening.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, and going to like an Asian country or like just any destination that is just like completely different to Australia would definitely give you a bit of shock. But hot pot is definitely your jam. Was there any other dishes in Taiwan that you, I guess, have like on the regular was like became your favorite whilst you were there?
There was a lot of great food in Taiwan.
Yeah.
I think they have a really strong food culture that I think in Australia we kind of just borrow bits and pieces of dishes from other places, but in Taiwan they have a strong identity that's framed
Mm,
around their food,
mm,
and so things like hot pot, the night market foods as well.
mm.
They have these huge like pie, which is like a massive chicken steak, which is just delicious. Um, Beef noodle soup, of
Yeah,
course, is always delicious.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to unpack in the Taiwan food culture.
And one final thing, I see on the top left corner a glass of bubble tea. Was that your first time having bubble tea as well, or was that something
I can't
you've had
remember. I
before?
feel like it very well could have been. I think I was probably so overwhelmed by the hot pot at
Yeah,
the time. I just was like, oh, there's bubbles in my drink as well. That's probably normal.
just roll
um,
with it.
yeah, but no, bubble tea is huge. I
Yeah.
remember working in Taiwan, and people would sort of get to 3 p.m. in the afternoon and someone would be like, oh, maybe we should order some bubble tea. And we'd sort of phone up, and then next minute there'd be like 20 bubble teas delivered by some guy on a
Whoa,
motorbike, and we'd just all sit there and drink our bubble tea in the afternoon.
that is
um,
amazing.
yeah, crazy.
Awesome, mate. Let's go to the next photo. Let me just go there. Ah, I think that's you on the bike there.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's happening here, mate?
Yeah, so this is one of the things I loved about Taipei was they
Mm,
had just a fantastic public transport system, and I think one of the interesting things about it was this share bike system
mm,
called UBike,
mm.
and basically you could get your easy card, as it was called, and you could just sort of tap on and off and grab a bike
Yeah,
and ride it wherever you wanted to go.
yeah.
And it was just so great being in Taiwan with the other Colombo Plan scholars as well. So in this photo, there's Cameron and Abby, who were the other Taipei scholars or Taiwan scholars with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a girl in the background, Svetlana, who was visiting from China. And a good friend of mine, Chris, in the front of the photo, who wasn't a scholar at the time, but subsequently became a scholar in a later year.
Oh, wow.
One of the classic things when we were living in Taipei was that because it was so hot during the day, often in the evening, sort of, 11, 12 at night, you'd go out for a walk and then you'd end up on your UBikes, sort of gallivanting around town. And so I think this photo it's a good picture into what life was like in Taiwan, where most nights there'd be some kind of adventure like this. You just roam around and have a bunch of fun hanging out with people. Yeah,
in the photo it looks pitch dark and there's no one around. The streets look empty as. But
I should have looked at the timestamp on the photo, but I feel like it probably very well could have been like 1 a.m. or something. And that was pretty typical.
Yeah.
It always was rough when you had Chinese class at 8 a.m. the next morning. But I think it was worth it.
Definitely. Yeah, it must have been. How long ago was this? Because I'm sure, maybe because of COVID, but I'm sure maybe bike or ride sharing isn't a big thing anymore. But because of possibly COVID, but yeah, definitely something everyone would do. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, this would have been back in 2018. I think in Taiwan they seem to have handled COVID pretty well, and
that's true.
They have a lot of affection for their U-bike, so I'd be surprised if they'd shut it down too much.
But everyone's just wearing gloves. Everyone's just wearing gloves on the bikes.
Probably.
Yeah. Awesome, mate. All right, let's go to the next photo. What's happening here? There's a lot of people.
Yeah, so this photo was taken at the end of my internship. I'd given a presentation about my work, and then everyone sort of decided to take a photo together. So it's quite a precious memory of my time interning in Taiwan. And I think for the people listening and not watching, there's it's quite a big team, and it was a great team in that it was very diverse. There was a lot of Taiwanese people, but also other Australians and Europeans and Americans. And I think one of the great things about this internship was learning the value of working with people from all different parts of the world and the different perspectives and ideas they could bring into things. I think this moment in the photo was sort of the accumulation of this 6-month internship I'd done. It was a good time.
There's a lot of diagrams and maths happening in the background. Well, what was the internship? What was the field in for the internship?
Yeah, so I was interning at a medical technology company, and we were designing internet-connected devices for sort of drug administration. So particularly around diabetes, we were trying to help people who had diabetes, remember when they'd injected themselves with insulin and things like that, to sort of stop them either injecting too much or not injecting at all, thinking they had already injected with insulin. The funny story with the diagrams on the back is that we'd actually filmed an ad for one of the products at this company in the office.
Yeah.
And there'd been a lot of banter around, let's make it look really like complicated and technical. And so people had drawn up this like ridiculous maths on the wall so that it could be in the background of this ad.
That was completely unrelated.
So I mean, like, it kind of was what we were doing at work, and we were doing a lot of maths and coding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The actual diagrams on the wall were kind of put there as a bit of a joke.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah. So if you Google really hard, you can find me in the background of an ad for a drug injection device.
Everyone do it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And you mentioned that really opened your experiences and perspective to working with different people from different cultures. Like, what was the thing that really stood out to you, and like, what do you sort of take away from that experience? And do you think you will, do in the future if you were to work in a very diverse team?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that question.
Yeah. Maybe just one thing.
Look, I guess being from Australia and having lived here all my life, I've been exposed to people that were very similar to me. And when I was put into this team, suddenly there's all sorts of really different people. And it kind of challenged my view of what a normal person was, in that sort of I was used to a very certain type of person in Australia. I mean, obviously people in Australia are all, there's difference between people as well, but I think in
Yeah.
terms of the cultural backgrounds and expectations, there's sort of obviously a commonality.
Yeah.
And when I was put in this team, and there's people from Europe and South America and obviously Taiwan and the US, it was just eye-opening how different people could be, and how different people's cultural expectations were. And I think at first I kind of saw it as, I guess, obviously my background's better, and the Australian way of doing things is more correct. And it sort of took a couple of weeks to realize, actually, no, there's just because that's the way I know things and that's what I'm used to doesn't mean it's better. And actually there's a lot of value and interesting ideas and insights that can come from seeing the way other people do things. I think there's obviously a few specific things that you could unpack there, but I think that gets to the heart of it, is sort of learning to appreciate rather than be afraid of differences in culture.
100%. I think maybe it's because from my perspective, I'm not an engineering student, but I am a commerce student, and business around the world is just so varied, and everyone does business in different ways. But I guess my very uninformed opinion, like in engineering or just like any STEM fields, like it's very, I guess, objective, and everything is, I guess, like there's like a correct answer or a single source of perspective of how you should do things. But hearing it from from what you just said, I think there's different perspectives for whatever field you're in, right? Even if it's like very nuanced and specific, if it is even in STEM. So, yeah, no,
definitely. I think often, it's easy to think that in science there's sort of one correct answer, and I think when you study at uni, that tends to be the case. You kind of, you're reaching that one textbook answer, but in a workplace context, there's often a lot more complexities and considerations to reach sort of more of like an optimal solution, and the sort of trade-offs you might make along the way, in terms of, might be something like, we can get this extra functionality, but we'll lose some of our battery life or something like that, for example. And I think when you have people from different cultures, they might then bring in completely different ideas and perspectives or ways of thinking about those problems. And so, it's not necessarily always just a binary yes or no, or correct or incorrect. It can be much more complicated.
100%. Awesome, dude. Amazing. All right, let's try going to the next photo. Let's do it. Different background, different setting. What's happening here?
So this was quite a special moment as well. My family came to visit me when I was in Taiwan. And in this photo, it's my family and also a Taiwanese friend of mine and his family. We're all in a sort of Chinese banquet room.
Wow.
And I think this was quite special in that I was able to show my family the experience that I'd had in Taiwan, and kind of the life that I'd been able to create for myself there. And also it was really interesting to have this dynamic where there was this Taiwanese family and this Australian family, and there was this huge language barrier, and it was very difficult for us to communicate. And it just was a really interesting experience where I guess we were both trying to show respect to each other and communicate and appreciate the situation we were in, without necessarily being able to always put it into words. So the guy in the Nike shirt, his name's Sean, and he was one of my first friends when I arrived in Taiwan, first Taiwanese friends. And fortunately, he was learning English. He was learning to become an English teacher. And that meant he was kind of the in-between my parents and his parents. So it was quite interesting. I think the other interesting thing here I found is that going back to what I was saying about I guess cultural norms, and sort of my perspective originally being like, the Australian way is the best way. And I think one of the things I initially found a bit interesting here was when Sean suggested, oh, you know, your family's coming to Taiwan, got to make sure we have dinner. I thought, oh, that sounds good. And I wasn't necessarily thinking that they'd invite us out to this really posh banquet room. Sort of, I guess my Australian perspective was, oh, okay, we'll go around to their house and, you know, have a barbecue or something like that. And so I think it just, it's a really interesting cultural difference in that for the Taiwanese people, showing respect and hospitality is actually, you know, taking people out and treating them to a nice meal in a banquet hall like this. And obviously, I think it ended up being a very special moment for my family and for his family to be able to share in that experience.
Mate, that's incredible. Yeah, I think definitely the clashes between Australian culture and Taiwanese culture as well. Did you see from like your family coming over that they were just very Australian things, and like some things that you, I guess, like living in Taiwan for an extended amount of time, you just sort of forgot, but like, or just like the Australianness of just been like rubbing off slowly, but you sort of like realize that you've picked up some Taiwanese, I guess, like behaviors or like cultural norms in the process.
Yeah, I think having my family come and visit, I think that it was about halfway through my year in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And it definitely helped me to reflect and realize how much I'd learned in that time, because obviously they were coming and they were completely fresh, and so there were all these things that I had to explain to them about the way people do things, and you know, the sort of the culture and the experience of what it's like to live there. And so I think having them come and being able to, or being in a position where I was sort of responsible for their experience in Taiwan and had to explain everything to them, was kind of like, wow, like I've learned so much in the last 6 months, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can remember in this meal I was having with Sean's family, they really, his family really loved my younger brother, the guy in the white shirt in this photo.
Yeah.
Because I just thought like the idea of a cute little white boy was just a bit like super exciting for them. And I remember he really liked the xiaolong bao, which is like a classic Taiwanese dish.
Yeah.
And he just kept eating only the xiaolong bao, and so my friend's parents just kept ordering more xiaolong bao because they thought like they wanted to keep my little brother happy. So yeah.
That's awesome. And using chopsticks as well, and the cuisine. I'm sure you haven't had pop before. Maybe your parents aren't so adventurous with the Asian cuisine as well.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the things they hadn't really had before, and I was able to show them, you know, like this is hot pot and this is like night market food and all this kind of stuff. And I guess now that they've experienced that, they're much more open to trying new foods like that. And so sometimes now, even at home, we'll have hot pot at home, and I'll sort of go to the Asian grocer and buy all the stuff just to sort of relive the times in Taiwan. And I think if we'd tried to do that 3-4 years ago, I think that everyone would have been like, what on earth is this? So yeah, it's good that I've been able to share that with them.
Yeah. 100%. It's just like a feeling that you can't really replicate, having like a shared meal together, either it's in hot pot or like a nice banquet like this where everyone's sitting in a circle. I really do miss that. Hopefully after lockdown we can all do it again.
Absolutely. And I think it's something in Australia we don't do so much, where we, you know, all sort of eat out of the same thing and cook a meal together. Is it something you sort of grew up with in Australia, doing hot pot and things like that, or did you experience it overseas as well? Yeah, mate.
We didn't do hot pot when I was young as much, but we do have like shared meals together where we have like a selection of like dishes and we all eat together from that, rather than having our own like plate and having all our food on that plate and we just finish that plate. But yeah, we do that quite regularly, and I think it's something that I'll definitely want to do in the future as well, because it's just special, I think, because
I agree. Yeah,
it's just something you can't really replicate. So, good stuff, mate. Good stuff. Next photo. Yeah. I missed. Maybe describe the photo a little bit for people that can't see it. I see dope. That's awesome.
So this photo is I guess it's looking out the window onto a cityscape from a abandoned skyscraper. yeah, so I guess one of the things here is being in Taiwan and sort of just being out of my typical environments. Encourage, like, it helped me to get into the zone of exploring and just wanting to go on adventures all the time. And so one of the things I got into in Taiwan, which was a bit unusual, was exploring abandoned buildings and things like that. I don't know. I'd never do that in Australia because I'd feel like, maybe like the police will come and arrest me or something. But for some reason, being in Taiwan, it felt like it was. There's
no police in Taiwan.
Yeah, that's right. So this was one of many different places different abandoned buildings that I explored. But I thought this one was pretty cool because you could kind of go all the way up to the top onto the roof even of this like 15-story abandoned skyscraper. It just it was quite exciting being in Taiwan and living this life where on one side you were doing really awesome work and internships and engaging with DFAT and promoting Australia, and then on the other side on the weekends you'd go on these trips and hang out with friends and visit abandoned buildings, and just it was a very stimulating and exciting kind of time.
I definitely agree with you, mate. I think, well, for me, when I go to travel, like, I can really just be me, because I think in Australia and just living at home still, I think there's like a certain level of responsibility, and then you have to follow those responsibilities and do what you need to do. But when you travel overseas, you just have to take care of yourself for the most part. If you travel with family, that's a different story. But for the most part, you travel by yourself and you just can do whatever you want, and you can just really be you. Like, for example, you were traveling and finding abandoned buildings. I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think in a certain extent, if you go and live overseas for a while, you kind of you're a bit liberated from the sort of expectations of your life back in Australia. Like, I think I found there was a lot of things I was involved in, and people who maybe had a preconceived idea of like who I was to them, and all those kind of things, which are not bad in their own way, but by suddenly shifting your location and your context, you can just kind of start afresh and just do whatever you want to do and meet all the people you want to meet and go to all the places you want to meet, and kind of establish in a way like a fresh set of friends and connections. It's not to sort of say that the connections back in Australia and all the friends and so on are bad, but when you've been in that context for your entire life, 20 years or whatever, it's quite interesting to sort of suddenly start afresh in a new place. I found that quite interesting.
No, I agree with you, mate. Hopefully we can all travel again soon as well.
That's right. Yeah, man. It would be so good to get back to Taiwan and explore some abandoned buildings again. And eat all the hot pot, like all that good stuff.
eat a hot pot in an abandoned building. That's it.
Oh man, that just resonates with my soul, Andrew.
That's it. Awesome. Next, I believe this is the final photo, and I believe that's Akia behind in the banner. What's happening here, mate?
Yeah, so this photo, I guess one of the things in Taiwan and being an NCP scholar, I guess being an NCP scholar anywhere really, is you want to really get involved in promoting Australia in the kind of, whatever host location you're in. And different people have different ways of doing that. But for me and some of the other scholars in my generation, a big part of that was being involved in the AKIA Taipei branch, so Australia Taiwan Youth Association it was called. And I just found that being involved in that was a great vehicle for doing all sorts of things to promote Australia in Taiwan. And in this particular photo, we hosted a stall at the NTU, the National Taiwan University Intercultural Fair, and we actually made a whole lot of lamingtons and sort of sold these lamingtons to people, because the idea was at this stall that you'd sell food from your home country, and had all sorts of shenanigans with different slang and quizzes about Australia and Tim Tams, all the very stereotypical stuff that's a bit painfully stereotypical. But it did provide a platform to sort of talk to people about Australia. And I think people in Taiwan, particularly, they have a lot of respect, and in a way, they sort of look up to Australia. They see it as a leader in our region, and they really value things like the quality of the meat that they get from Australia and things like that. And so it's almost an unbalanced relationship where people in Australia don't have a clue about Taiwan, but everyone in Taiwan's like, wow, Australia, I'd love to live there. And so I think sort of trying to show that there's people in Australia who actually do care about Taiwan and the Taiwanese people is an important part of strengthening that connection.
Yeah, and definitely the new Colombo Plan Scholarship does that with its people-to-people connections. And yeah, just examples like this really do showcase, even though, like you said, painstakingly very stereotypical of what people think of Australia. But I think it's a good way for people to start, I guess, familiarizing and understanding about Australia and Taiwan itself, and just starting to build off that. I think this is definitely wrong, but like I think the biggest thing that people know about Taiwan is like the bubble tea, or the boba tea, because yeah, it's just so popular. In my community, it's predominantly Asian community, and in my local town, there's I think last time I counted, there was like 8 or 9 bubble tea stores just within like that town center. So yeah, mate, I definitely agree. I think yeah. Yeah. Fedikum hard yakka. Was this everyone's idea, or was this like just like the top 10 Aussie slang and just like writing it down?
Well, the idea originally was that we'd create these banners. So there's sort of in the photo, there's pictures of people holding signs up with Australian slang, and the idea was that people could sort of take photos with these banners and put it on their social media. So it was a bit of like I guess like a photo booth kind of idea. And yeah, it also, I guess it prompted a lot of conversation, because we had this quiz where we like, fair dinkum, what do you think that means? And you'd get some really interesting answers from the Taiwanese people. And it was a lot of fun as well, explaining to them what lamingtons were, sort of, it's like kind of like an Australian cake. But yeah, I mean, it would have been good to cook something else, like, meat pies or something, but it's very difficult to get access to that kind of ingredients. So lamingtons felt fairly achievable.
Yeah, good choice either way. And during like toward the end of your scholarship and your time overseas, was there anything that you missed about Australia?
Yeah, look, I think, it was definitely, there were times that I missed home quite a lot. It's not the easiest thing just to sort of live in a completely foreign culture for a long period of time.
Yeah.
I think probably the thing I missed the most was the weather. I think in Taiwan, I mean, the weather's not awful, but it would often be really humid and hot. And also you wouldn't get like really clear blue skies. I think I kind of just forgot what that was like when I was living in Taiwan, because there'd often be a lot of pollution. And I mean, it wouldn't be as bad as in, say, Beijing, but you definitely, like, it would be pretty rare to have a really rich, deep blue sky. So I think when I came back to Australia, and you just look up at the sky, and you'd be like, wow, like I forgot what that was like. So it could be a bit sort of rainy and gloomy and humid in Taipei at times. But yeah, in the most part, I was sadder to leave than I wasn't yearning to come home, if that makes sense. So yeah,
we all feel that after we've traveled for a long time. But I guess the reality is that we're stuck in Australia for an indefinite amount of time. For definitely, at least my hunch is at least another 6 months. But that's nothing to be sad about. I think we can always do this, like look back at your experiences overseas and talk about that, and remember the good times, and until the next time we can actually travel. So
I think it'll make us appreciate travel more as well, because now that we can't do it, it's kind of like, oh, that was really good, we won't take it for granted next time we get to go on a trip.
100%, mate. Well, thank you for sharing all all of the photos and your experiences. I really do appreciate that, and I'm sure the other NCP scholars as well will definitely appreciate that too. So I think we will cap it off for part one there, and I will see you and everyone else in part two.
Sounds good.